This is Kevin from Performance Trends. We're going to talk about our drag race analyzer today. Drag race analyzer comes with a lot of example vehicles already built in, a lot of production vehicles, some race vehicles. You can click here, File, Open Vehicle Library, Open an Example, or Open Saved Vehicles. Saved vehicles are vehicles that you're going to create yourself. So an example vehicle is something that comes with the program. And you can see this is 2011 Ford Mustang up here, it says. And if you look in here, they're arranged alphabetically, which if you got a number in front, by the number. Go down here to the 2011s. 2011, there it is. This is the vehicle here, right here, that we're working with right here. What the drag race analyzer is meant for is to let you estimate straight line performance, either a quarter mile, eighth mile, or something longer or shorter, 300 feet for sand drags, or maybe even Bonneville, to estimate top speed. And it's got these different components here, engine, trans, and such, and then calculate performance here, which is weather conditions, wind conditions, and you can see here the different lengths, track lengths. Engine specs, obviously what the power curve is like, and there's different options for trying to make it as easy or as detailed as you want. You can just specify the peak horsepower only. Let's say peak horsepower, what RPM does it occur at? Peak torque and horsepower, like we did with this Shelby. Or you can put in a full power curve if you want. The little note saying that whatever we generate for a full power curve over here is not based on any of these specs over here, that they're completely separate. So if you put in a power curve over here, you can go back to, and you can just go back to saying, I want to go back to peak torque and horsepower, and these specs now become enabled. This is what the program will use, and these specs over here are all disabled. Trans up here is it a clutch or a torque converter? We have a program that lets you estimate a clutch. If you don't put in clutch specs, it makes sense. You could have too wimpy a clutch, and it could be spinning the whole way down the track. This is a manual transmission. Obviously, if you got a torque converter here, you can put in your converter capacity and stuff. It tells you what the current stall RPM would be based on this current converter capacity and such. And but I'll put it back to where it was. How many gears you got? This thing, Mustang's got a 6-speed, but let's say you have some kind of 10-speed. You just put in 10, and it opens up a lot more gear ratios here. You may not need them all, but you can put them in. And then what kind of transmission efficiency? Typically 97% is a pretty good estimate for a transmission, but the more heavy duty you go, typically the less efficient, the more losses in it with the big gears and such. So 97 is pretty typical for a modern manual. Body to axle ratio, how much lock efficiency you got, body weight, obviously pretty important. What kind of drive layout do you have? Front wheel drive, all wheel drive, motorcycle. This is rear wheel drive. And the other inputs here, including frontal area and drag coefficient. If you're not going real fast, frontal area and drag coefficient, the aerodynamics of the car is not real important. If you're going 150, 180 miles an hour, frontal area and drag coefficient are really important. And if you want to estimate how much a headwind or tailwind it will affect your ET, like for doing dial-in or throttle stop predictions, you want to have this estimated somewhat correctly. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to have something reasonable in here for the aerodynamics of the car. Wheels and tires, weight, and on the rear, what kind of traction factor, construction, including drag slicks. Little bit of background. Obviously, you pull weight off a car, it's going to go faster. It's going to accelerate more quickly. But if you pull weight off a rotating component, like let's say wheels and tires, you get a double improvement, because not only do you have less weight to accelerate down the track, you have less weight, less inertia to have to spin up as it goes down the track. So any weight you pull off a wheel tire is a double benefit. So we'll look at that. We'll do a quick modification here in a second here. Driving style, we got these computer-driven options. Computer picks the RPM for best ET. Computer-driven launch. You just tell it to launch RPM, and the computer feathers the clutch to give you optimum traction for the limitations of the tire traction you got for the tires you specified. Shift time, 4/10 is pretty slow. It'd be like a street driver. 8/10 would be incredibly slow. 2/10 a clutchless. And then what are you doing with the throttle? Are you trying to match the RPM, go about half throttle? Or are you doing a power shift? Or are you lifting your foot off the throttle during each shift? And it all has a fairly significant impact on performance. And again, shift RPMs, you want the computer to pick the RPMs based on the power curve and the gear ratios. Or do you want to use the RPMs below, and here you can specify the RPMs yourself. We're going to go back to computer picks because that is the easiest. And then calculate performance. Again, here's weather conditions and what kind of headwind, tailwind, sidewind you got. And we're going to go quarter mile time. Here you can see the other options. And rollout is how far the vehicle moves before the ET timer starts. And for doing detailed, if you're looking for a couple of thou, how much rollout you got can influence things significantly. So we'll calculate performance for this. Here you can see what's happening during each shift, the 1-2 shift, and what happened after the shift, what's happening at the critical quarter mile segments, 330, 60 foot, 660, and 1320. So it gives you a little synopsis of what happened as the car went down the track. Here it's telling you the current ET in mile an hour, and then the last is something else we ran before we started this movie. You can make a graph of this, and you can see you got a graph. The light blue is the converter, or the clutch RPM, sorry. Engine RPM is the blue. Green is the mile an hour, as shown over here. And you can see during first gear, the clutch had not locked up at all. We were feathering the clutch and such to try and get optimum launch with without breaking the tires loose. As soon as we got into second gear, after this shift, you can see the engine RPM approached the clutch RPM, and here the clutch is locked up, and then here the clutch is locked up. During the shift, both times, obviously the clutch is not locked up, and then here again the clutch is locked up. So it gives you a nice little review of what happened as the car went down the track. And let's do what I said we're going to do. Let's pull 20 pounds, or 38. Let's pull 20 pounds, so 18 pounds is going to be each front wheel and tire. Program does not check to see if what you're trying to do is physically possible. That's on you. I mean, I could say it's got 0 weight, which is not possible, but I could tell it that because it's a simulation. So if you wanted to see what would happen, you could do it. Okay, up here is the little summary of what happened. This is all going to look very similar because it's a very small change. But here you can see a little snapshot of how much improvement we got. The ET improved from 1189 to 1186, so we're 3/100ths faster, and the mile an hour improved. We're about 0.27 mile an hour faster. 60 foot improved slightly. So from just pulling 20 pounds off of each front wheel and tire, we gained 3/100ths. And again, here's a graph of that. You can click on graph history up here, and the history pops up, which is a chronological list of every test you've run. And here you can see the 1189 ET with the 1186 ET in this column here. And this graph column, if you put a yes there, this test or run will also be included on the graph. Now, it says the top row is always included, so you wouldn't need to put a yes there, but I did anyway. So you got the 2 yeses. I want to graph both these tests. So here's a little comparison, and you can see the lines are almost on top of each other. It's not until you get here down the track a bit you can start to see that this purple line, the previous test, is a little bit slower Then the green, the newest test with a little bit lighter wheels and tires. And if we click on the graph someplace, it'll show you at that particular point what the mile an hour was, and 1148 versus 1194. You can see this color doesn't show up very good, so let's make for background color. Let's make a gray background, and then you can see these labels here a little bit better. So that gives you a little idea how the program can be used for predicting performance, or more importantly, for predicting the effect of your modifications. Thanks.